She had been lying on that bed since morning. The nurses had taken her blood pressure, asked a few routine questions, and left her there with a small wrapper tucked around her belly. She remembered one of them saying, "She's just a first timer. Early labor, no need to worry. She's a first timer." But now, her womb spoke a different language. Long ago, in the heart of Lagos, beyond the traffic-choked roads and the impatient horns of yellow danfos, there stood a public hospital, one of those buildings that wore its years like old wrappers, faded, torn at the corners, but still trying. That morning, Hariza had left his gadget shop at Balogun Market and rushed home after Ifeoma called that she was having cramps. "Arinze, please let's go. I don't want to give birth at home. Oh. Don't forget the delivery mat. Where is my baby sauce? Arinze, please add everything inside the Ghana must go. Let's go. I don't want to forget anything, please." It was their first child, and Arinze had followed his wife Ifeoma to the hospital to deliver their baby. The signboard outside read General Hospital Ode. Though the RNA General had long fallen off, the building mourned under its own weight, broken ceilings, rusted beds, and peeling walls that had heard more prayers than church altars. In Ward 7, the maternity unit, lay Ifeoma. She had always imagined her first bed to be surrounded by warmth, maybe the scent of fried plantain wafting from the kitchen, her mother humming softly beside her, her husband holding her hand. But instead, she found herself lying alone in a thin hospital gown on a creaky metal bed in a public ward that smelled of bleach and neglect. The hospital was one of those places the government built with pride but forgot to love. Its corridors groaned under the weight of footsteps, complaints, and tired hopes. The paint on the walls flaked like dry skin. The window panes held more dust than glass. Still, it was where the poor came to give birth. She was in her 8th month, her first pregnancy. Her belly curved high like a calabash filled with river water. Her legs were swollen, her eyes heavy. She had not slept, not truly. The mattress beneath her back was thin, too thin to carry both woman and pain. Her wrapper stuck to her skin, soaked in heat and fear. One of the nurses had given her a file and mumbled, "Just rest. Your labor never even starts." And this was yesterday. She had been lying on that bed since morning. The nurses had taken her blood pressure and asked a few routine questions and left her there with a small wrapper tucked around her belly. She remembered one of them saying she's just a first timer. Early labor. Now early labor be this. It never starts. There is no need to worry. But now her womb spoke a different language. The pain came like a wave, deep and wide, rising from her feet and crashing against her chest. She gasped, clutched the bed rail. The metal was cold. Her fingers trembled. "Nurse!" she called out, barely above a whisper. No one came. She tried again, louder this time. "Nurse! Please!" A few feet away at the nurse's table, 3 women in uniform sat. One was scrolling through her phone, another rubbing white balm on her forehead. The third had her back turned, chewing something loudly. They heard her, yes, but they did not move. "She go still shout tire," one of them muttered. "Early labor dey always be like this. E go be like say dem wan die." They laughed, but Ifeoma did not. Now, as the afternoon sun climbed high and pressed itself against the window glass, Ifeoma felt her body shift. A pressure, a pull, a wave from inside, like her womb was folding in on itself. She clutched herself. "Nurse!" she called softly. No one answered again. "Nurse, Biko!" Still nothing. Then came the pain. This one was different. Not a knock, a slam. It rose from her spine and wrapped around her chest like a belt, forcing her eyes shut. She cried out, a sharp sound, raw and wordless. One nurse turned and scoffed. She's a first-timer, abeg. Let her stop all this her shouting. The show never even starts. They all chuckled and continued. Outside the ward, sitting on a warm bench with flaking green paint, was Oga Arinze, Ifeoma's husband. His slippers were dusty, his shirt was wrinkled. On his lap sat a small Ghana must-go bag that was filled with baby clothes, a tin of milk and a bottle of Dettol. He had hurriedly left his shop in Balogun market after his wife called. His face was tired but hopeful, the kind of tired a man carries when he is trying to do everything right with very little. He looked at the maternity ward for the fifth time that hour. A young boy selling lacasera and gala passed by. Bros, you go buy? Arinze waved him off. Later, I dey wait for my wife. He brought out his phone and checked for the third time if he had network, but none. Network was misbehaving. He stood, paced a little, sat back down. A woman beside him, her own belly round and heavy, shifted uncomfortably and asked, Oga, your wife dey labour? He nodded. Since yesterday. Ha! She go born today. I dey believe say she go born today. I just hope say the nurses dey do well inside, he said, eyes narrowing slightly. My wife no dey too get mouth to shout. She dey endure things too much. The woman nodded solemnly. For dis place, you must shout oo. If not, dem go forget you. Inside, Ifeoma was forgetting how to be brave. Another wave came. She bent, gripped the bed rails, and let out a long, desperate moan. Still, no nurse moved. And then a breeze, not from the fan above. That one had stopped turning hours ago. The breeze was low, cool. It rolled over her skin like cold water trickling down her back. When she opened her eyes, someone was standing by her bedside. A woman in a nurse gown, older than the others, calm. Her eyes didn't dart around like the rest. They were steady, soft. Ifeoma didn't care where she came from or why her face was unfamiliar. She was just glad, so glad that someone had finally come. The nurse didn't ask questions. She simply touched Ifeoma's shoulder and said, You are doing well. Breathe through it. I am here. Ifeoma reached for her hand. It was cold, strangely cold, but steady. They stayed like that as the next contraction rose like a mountain, then crashed. Outside, Arinze felt something stir in his chest, like the wind had shifted, like someone had just answered a prayer. The pain did not stop. It came like waves crashing against a fragile shore, tide after tide, pulling pieces of her strength with each return. But the nurse, she stayed. Through the sharp groans and gaps, she wiped Ifeoma's forehead with the edge of her sleeve. She held her hand without speaking much, and somehow, with this stranger by her side, the world no longer felt so cold. Ifeoma did not ask for her name. She only whispered, Thank you, in between clenched teeth, and the nurse would nod, quietly, like she understood the weight of carrying life inside your bones. It was not just pain they shared, it was something deeper. A silent kinship. Ifeoma had seen her face once before, not clearly, but enough to remember. Months ago, during one of her antenatal visits, she had watched the woman moving from bed to bed, her footsteps slow but purposeful. She wasn't like the others, those nurses who backed orders or rolled their eyes when a woman mourned. No, this one had gentleness in her fingertips. Ifeoma had admired her from afar then. Now it felt as though she had returned just for her. Outside, thunder rumbled softly, like a distant warning. Rain tapped gently against the cracked window. The rest of the world remained indifferent. Two other women labored in silence, their faces turned to the wall, their own groans ignored. And still, the other nurses did not come, but the one by Ifeoma's side, she whispered, Almost there. Ifeoma cried out. Her legs trembled. The nurse adjusted her position, placed both hands under Ifeoma's belly, and spoke with the calmness of one who had walked this road before. Push now. Slowly. Let your body lead you. Her voice was like music made of water, steady, soft, and sure. With every ounce of strength left in her, Ifeoma bore down. Once, twice, and then on the third wave, she felt it. A release, a flood, a cry, a child, a boy. His scream filled the room, loud and raw, like the voice of a new world declaring itself. Ifeoma collapsed back into the mattress, drenched in sweat, her chest rising and falling like a drum beat after war. She laughed through tears, her lips trembling. He's here, she whispered. My son is here. The nurse smiled. Let me clean him up, she said gently, already wrapping the baby in a small white cloth. Her hands were sure. Her arms cradled the child like the familiarity of a mother. I will be right back, she added. Rest now. Ifeoma nodded, eyes heavy with joy and exhaustion. She did not see where the nurse went. She only knew her baby was safe, and that was enough, at least, until the room grew still and the hours began to pass. One nurse entered briefly and glanced at her chart without speaking. Her arm searched for the child that should be lying next to her, but there was no baby, no sound, no nurse. Excuse me, she called out, her voice hoarse. Where is my child? A nurse looked up from her phone. Which child? My son. The nurse that helped me. She took him to clean. Ifeoma's mind swirled in confusion. The pain that had been there earlier, sharp, unyielding, was now replaced by a growing unease. Her baby. Where was her baby? The bed beside her, still stained with the remnants of her labor, felt cold. Nurse! Her voice trembled, but the room was silent. She sat up, her legs wobbling from exhaustion. The distant sound of chattering nurses filtered into the room. Their laughter made her skin crawl. Was she imagining it? Had the nurse gone somewhere with her child? It felt like the walls were closing in. Her heart raced faster, and a sharp chill gripped her chest. She staggered to her feet, grabbing onto the nearest rail for support. No one had come back. The pain that had been slowly receding now returned full force, gnawing, relentless. She called out once again, Nurse, please, where is my baby? She stepped towards the door, half in a daze. The cold breeze from the corridor crept in like a warning. The nurse frowned. Who? Nobody carried any baby from here. Oh. Which baby are you even talking about? I saw her, Ifeoma said, her voice rising with fear. She was right here with me. She delivered my baby. The nurses exchanged confused glances. There was no delivery documented, one said. We didn't even know you were that far along. Ifeoma's breath caught in her chest. Please, she whispered. Please take me to where she went. I need my son. The nurses, now unsettled, hesitated, but her eyes, with the terror and trembling hope, left them no choice. I want my baby. Ifeoma's cry echoed down the maternity ward like a wounded bird caught in a trap. Her voice cracked, raw, and trembling. She had pushed life into the world, yet her arms were empty. One of the nurses, tall, slim, with tired eyes, finally turned. You delivered? She asked as if she was hearing her properly for the first time. Ifeoma's chest heaved. Yes, a baby boy. The nurse, she helped me. She took him to clean. She said she was coming back. Another nurse raised her brows, arms folded. Which nurse? Nobody collected any baby here since morning. I just gave birth, Ifeoma shouted, pointing to the wet sheet and blood-soaked wrapper beneath her. Check me, I have delivered. There was a pause. The first nurse stepped closer reluctantly. She pulled on gloves, approached the bed, and examined her briefly. Silence, then a shift in her eyes. She's right, the nurse said slowly, turning to the others. She's no longer pregnant. The others moved in. One opened a file at the edge of the bed, flipping through it hastily. No record of delivery, no documentation of any nurse receiving a newborn. Their voices overlapped, their tones no longer dismissive. The air in the ward began to thicken. Another nurse stepped forward. She adjusted her glasses and looked Ifeoma squarely in the eyes. Madam, she said, now with a gentler voice, we need you to calm down. Can you describe the nurse who helped you? Ifeoma blinked, heart pounding. She wore white. Her uniform was cleaner than the others, older maybe. She had a round face, dark skin, quiet eyes. She sat with me. She told me I was doing well. She held my hand. Any tag name? One nurse asked quickly. I didn't look. I was in pain. I just trusted her. One of them, Nurse Chisholm, hurried to the staff register. It was a blue book with years of sweat and fingerprints soaked into its covers. She flipped it to the page of that day, her fingers scanning the list of names. No extra staff signed in today. Another nurse joined her, eyes darting across the page. Maybe someone resumed without checking in. No, Chisholm said. Same at this time. The head matron cross-checked this herself during morning rounds. No additional shift assigned. The senior nurse now looked genuinely disturbed. She delivered a baby, and none of us saw her. She wasn't like the others, Ifeoma insisted, her voice steadier now. She was kind. She told me I wasn't alone. Meanwhile, Arinze couldn't sit still outside. He walked through the hospital halls, his slippers slapping against the cold floor with each step. He passed the same rusted beds, cracked walls, and worn-out nurses chatting in corners as if the place was a cafe, not a place of life and death. He had gone back to the maternity ward 4 times today. Each time, the nurses had ignored him. One of them had nodded at him dismissively, telling him his wife was still resting. But deep down his gut, Arinze knew something was wrong. They were hiding something. I have to speak to someone in charge, he muttered. He pushed open the doors to the administration offices, where the director sat behind the glass walls, hidden behind stacks of paper, discussing hospital policy like it was just another business. He knocked sharply on the glass. The room grew silent. I need answers. My wife is in that ward, and no one is telling me what's going on. I need to speak to the CMD. The staff in the office exchanged nervous glances. It was clear that Arinze wasn't going to back down. Back in the maternity ward, where Ifeoma had just delivered, though still unconvinced, but no longer dismissive, one of the nurses had turned to the back cabinet and pulled out an old laminated photo book. It was a visual record of all nursing staff, from permanent to contract. The plastic pages crackled as they flipped through it. Nne, look through. Let's see if this person you saw is here. Ifeoma wiped her face, leaned forward, and began to turn the pages slowly. 1, 2, 3. She paused, her breath caught in her throat. There she was, second row, fourth picture, smiling faintly, dressed in white, her eyes, the same quiet ones that watched her through every wave of pain. That's her! The nurses exchanged glances instantly. Are you sure? I am sure, Ifeoma whispered. That's the nurse who helped me. And there was silence. Nurse Ayo, whose hands were now visibly shaking, murmured under her breath. But that's Nurse Amaka. That's Amaka. The younger nurse frowned. Who? Nurse Amaka? Ayo repeated, louder this time, her voice thin with disbelief. She died. Ifeoma blinked. What? Ifeoma's mind swelled in confusion. One of the nurses continued, Madam, are you sure of what you're telling us? Are you sure? Are you sure this is the person that attended to you? Ifeoma nodded in confirmation. Yes, I am very sure. There was confusion within them. They didn't know how to tell her, but they had to. And then one of them spoke. The nurse you have just shown us died 2 weeks ago, she added quietly. Complications, miscarriage. She bled too much. They couldn't save her. At this point, Ifeoma's eyes widened. Her lips parted. No, that's not possible. That's not possible. She was here. She held me. She touched me. I saw her. She can't be dead. The air in the room had shifted. The laughter from the hallway faded. No one said a word. How is that possible? How is it possible? At this point, they all knew they were in a big mess. After a long pause, someone finally spoke from the doorway. It was Metro Eno, the head of the ward. She had entered quietly, overhearing enough to feel a lifetime. She didn't know what to say, but she had to say something. She's still in the hospital, Matron Eno said slowly. In the morgue. Her family is yet to collect her. But how is it even possible she attended to you? A chill swept across the room. The wall tilted slightly. The nurses who once rolled their eyes now stared at Ifeoma like she had spoken something sacred or cursed. I need to see her immediately. What are you even saying? Is this a prank? Ifeoma was sore and still in pains, but insisted. I want to see her. I want to see her. I need to see her. Right now. Nature hesitated, then nodded. The walk to the morgue was silent. No one joked. No one explained. The walls that once echoed idle chatter now held their breath, as if even the building feared what they might find below. And in the cold, tiled stillness of the morgue, drawer 18 was pulled open. There she was, Nurse Amaka, eyes closed, hands folded, skin pale but serene, wearing the same white gown, just as Ifeoma had described. A woman who had not breathed in 14 days, yet had delivered a baby that morning. Ifeoma staggered. She gripped the edge of the metal table, heart racing. She helped me, she whispered. I swear she helped me. And just as those words left her lips, one of the nurses screamed, because beside Nurse Amaka's still body lay a baby, wrapped in white, motionless, silent. There are cries that silence a whole building, not because they are loud, but because they come from a place deeper than sound. Ifeoma knelt on the cold mock floor, her hands trembling as they hovered over the steel bundle of white cloth inside the crypt. She didn't reach out. She didn't scream. She just stared, as though she still hoped her eyes were lying. Her baby, the boy she had carried for 8 months, the one who had cried in her arms just hours ago, now lay there, as quiet as death. Behind her, the nurses stood frozen. Matron Eno took one shaky step forward and gently peeled back the cloth from the baby's face. The moment Ifeoma saw his features, his tiny nose, the way his brow slightly furrowed like Arinze's, something inside her broke. It was not a scream, it was a collapse. The room was still still for the kind of pain that sat in Ifeoma's chest. Her baby, her long-awaited joy, lay motionless beside the body of a woman who had no breath to give. The silence broke first from within. It was something deeper, something that rose from her womb as if her body itself was mourning the child it no longer held. She clutched her belly and bent forward, sobbing into the white cloth covering her baby's tiny form. Then she wailed. A long, heavy sound that cracked against the morgue walls and rolled into the hallway like thunder before a storm. Arinze, who after waiting for long to no avail, had followed one of the nurses unknowingly. Arinze arrived at the morgue. He had already heard the robbers outside. People were talking. It started just like whispers, people in corridors, workers in cafe. Then it grew louder. One voice led to another, and soon the hospital's grounds were flooded with people demanding answers. His knees locked, his arms trembling, his eyes on his wife, then the child, then back again. No, he muttered, then louder. No, this cannot happen. This must be a joke. Don't tell me this is real. Am I dreaming? He stumbled backward, dragging his hand across his face like he was trying to wake himself from a nightmare. Matron Eno tried to speak, but her voice cracked. Ifeoma, Arinze, we didn't. Arinze didn't even allow her to finish. He turned like a wounded lion. You didn't mean what? You didn't mean for this? What are you even saying? His voice rose. You left her in pain. You ignored her. You ignored us. And now my baby is lying here lifeless. And you dare tell me you didn't mean for this? A nurse that died 2 weeks ago helped to deliver her? How is that even possible? And you tell me you didn't mean for this? You didn't know? What are you for saying? He grabbed a nearby stool and flung it across the room. It hit a steel cabinet with a bang that echoed far beyond the morgue walls. A male orderly peeked in. What's going on? What is happening? Then the nurses in the room began to cry. Some covered their mouths, others turned their faces to the wall. The youngest nurse, Nurse Joy, dropped to her knees and began to pray aloud, stammering through her tears. I am sorry, I am sorry, we are sorry, God forgive us, we are sorry. The tension poured out of the room like water from a broken pipe. And it didn't stop there. The morgue door swung open as two janitors rushed in, alerted by the crashing noise. One of them took one look at the scene and ran back shouting, Call security! Something dey happen for mortuary oh! Call security! Within minutes, the hallway was filled. Cleaners, nurses, doctors from different wards, even a patient on crutches hobbled in, drawn by the sound of grief. The tension in the air was thick, confusing. What happened? What happened here? Who died? People were asking randomly. Why the woman dey shout like that? Now who scattered this place like this now? Questions flew like arrows. Matron Eno raised her hands to calm down the crowd, but it grew even louder. Then someone from the crowd asked, Wait, what's that on the tray? Is that a baby? Another voice shouted, Where is the mother? Someone else from the crowd added, She's there. She's the one screaming and crying. So wetin happen now? Wetin happen to her baby? Una don kill the baby abi? Wetin happen? No, a nurse protested, sobbing. We didn't kill anyone. She said Nurse Amaka helped her, but Nurse Amaka died 2 weeks ago. The crowd stilled. Confusion swept through them like wind. Which nurse Amaka? You mean the nurse with round face? The one wey die for miscarriage? Dat one wey dey never bury since? You dey mad? How she go deliver baby if she don die? It's true! Somebody else shouted, her voice breaking through the nurse. It's true! She helped her. She held her hand. She helped her through the process. And there another whisper came, trembling. I think her spirit came back to help. But the crowd couldn't be convinced. How is that possible? Is this not negligence? How will you allow a ghost to attend to a pregnant woman? You people are careless. You killed her. You were the cause of it. At that moment, people started wondering, was it her touch that killed the baby? Was it her touch that killed him? Or was it the silence between life and death? The space Nurse Amaka had walked between? Maybe the spirit of the nurse, eager to fulfill the duty of care, had unknowingly crossed boundaries between life and death. And in doing so, the baby had been claimed by something more than mere mortal hands. That was the moment the atmosphere changed. Not just sadness, fear. The kind of fear that made people take a step back without knowing why. Murmurs rose. Dis hospital is cursed. Spirits dey roam for here. Na why dem no dey ever answer person wen dem dey call dem. God forbid. Dis thing must enter social media today. Phones came out. Someone began to record. Another woman heavily pregnant stood in the hallway and shouted, "Na here I suppose born next week. But I swear, I go change hospital. I no wan give birth beside ghost oo." Dat statement caused a small ripple of panic. The hospital PR officer arrived, pushing through the growing crowd. "Everybody please calm down. We're investigating the matter. Please stop recording." But it was too late. A man in security uniform tried to escort the person with camera away. The person shouted, "You go beat me? You wan beat me? Abi I no fit record wetin happen inside government hospital?" The commotion boiled over. Patients in other wards picked out of their rooms. Relatives of patients gathered at the entrance. People started shouting, "We need answers. We need justice. Make dem shut down dis ward now. Make dem shut down dis hospital. Where is the CMD? Why must Amaka body still dey morgue for 2 weeks? Even as your staff, you haven't given her a befitting burial." Nurse Amaka's spirit had done its job. The ghost had done what the living had failed to do, saved Ifeoma's life, even if her sons had been claimed in the process. The murmurs became a wave. Chaos had taken hold, not just because a baby had died, but because a ghost had done what the living refused to do. Some said, "My God," Arinze whispered. Then louder, "No, not like this. No, like this." He turned to the nurses. He was helpless. He didn't know what to say. He was confused. He didn't know whether to cry or to fight. He was broken beyond words. He was his first child, their first experience. This was mere negligence and wickedness. I will not let this slide. You all will go in for this. The chaos that erupted in the maternity ward did not remain confined in the hospital walls. Minutes after the first video footage was shared on social media, the whole town erupted in an unexpected wave of commentary, fueled by fear, disbelief, and rage. As the story began circulating, the whole community voiced their fears, frustrations, and confusion. In Ebudu, a bustling market near the hospital, the news spread faster than a wildfire. Women who gathered to buy vegetables and fish began murmuring about their own experiences at the general hospital. If they no care for person wey dey labour, how they go take care for person wey just dey sick? My cousin go there give birth last year. Na only God save her. I say make person never go there again for anything. Across the street, a small pharmacy owner pointed to the sign of the hospital. "I've heard about that place. Everyone knows the workers are tired, but ghosts? That's a new one." And yet, in this urban heartbeat, a surprising twist emerged. Some people were not surprised. At 3 p.m., the hospital's administrative offices were in chaos. The chief medical director, CMD, a tall man in his mid-50s, was pacing in his office, repeatedly dialing numbers. His brow furrowed. His usually composed demeanor was slipping as the pressure built. "Where are the security footage files? We need to see exactly what happened," he snapped at his assistant. As if they had any. The board of directors met urgently. Some suggested downplaying the incident and releasing a statement that the patient had been emotionally distressed. Others wanted to publicly deny the involvement of a ghost. They feared the public's growing obsession with supernatural elements might overshadow the hospital's already tarnished reputation. But Matron Eno, who had been sent in as damage control, was visibly shaken. She had seen the nurses in her team dissolve into tears as soon as the news broke. Their guilt was tangible. "We have to be transparent," she said quietly, her voice hoarse. Dr. Maka was not only a dedicated worker, She was a human being who felt the weight of this hospital's failures. If her spirit helped Ifeoma, we must not dismiss that. The truth needs to come out, even if it's not what we expected. The tension between reputation management and truth telling was palpable in that boardroom. By nightfall, the hospital was completely overwhelmed. The local police arrived to control the crowd while the journalists from every channel shouted questions over the chaos. How long has this hospital been ignoring complaints? Is this baby's death just negligence or there is more we don't know? Why didn't Nurse Amaka's co-workers help when she asked for lighter duties? The days that followed felt like smoke, heavy, bitter, slow to clear. Ifeoma no longer cried. Her eyes were dry, but her spirit was soaked. She sat in silence, day after day, staring out of the window of her room. She had gone home, but without her child, and absolutely not because of her own mistakes. Mere negligence. She didn't speak unless spoken to. She refused food, only taking sips of pepper soup and water to keep herself from collapsing. Her baby had been buried quietly under a young orange tree. They didn't play music, they didn't sing songs. They just stood around a small cloth wrapped body and said nothing. Because sometimes silence is the only sound grief understands. As for Arinze, he did not sit still. While Ifeoma mourned, he paced. While she whispered prayers, he demanded answers. He went back to the hospital the following weeks, not with hope, but with fury. He met with Matron Eno and the hospital director. He asked for files. Let me see the logs. Let me see the footage if there is any. Let me see where the system broke. At first, they were defensive, then embarrassed, then quiet. But what they found told a story more haunting than spirits. Nosamaka had filed three separate complaints, one to the HR, one to the unit head, and one to the general office. She had begged to be placed on lighter duties. She had reported constant bleeding. She had written word for word, I fear I may collapse one day and nobody will notice until it's too late. And three letters were signed and dated. All three were ignored. Her colleagues had whispered about it after her death. She was stubborn. She should have gone on leave. She liked overworking herself. But the truth was she kept showing up because no one else would. Because the ward was always short-staffed. Because when one nurse took leave, another carried double load. Nurse Amaka died in that same hospital hallway. She had been found by a cleaner unconscious, bleeding. By the time they wheeled her in, her womb had already emptied itself of life. And still, they wrote it off as one of those things. Now, that same woman, lifeless in the morgue for 2 weeks, had walked again. And not to hunt, but to help, to do one last duty the living failed to do. Echon Eno sat on her desk, reading the last complaint Nurse Amaka had filed. She shook her head, tears in her eyes. She was warning us, she whispered, but we didn't listen. Ifeoma sat in her small one-room apartment, staring at the only baby cloth she had managed to keep. It was yellow, soft, untouched. When Arinze came in that evening, he knelt in front of her. I want to fight, he said, but I won't fight alone. She didn't respond at first. Then she looked up. Her eyes weren't dry anymore, but this time the tears weren't from sorrow. They were from fire. I will fight too, she said, not just for our son, but for the woman who helped me, even after death. And so it began, together with North Amaka's family, not like a protest, not like a riot, a quiet storm. They gathered names, women who had lost children in that same ward, wives whose complaints were ignored, husbands who buried their children with no explanations, old files, forgotten names, faces blurred by time. The most prominent among them was Uche, Nurse Amaka's husband. He was a quiet man, once proud of his wife's work, now a widower raising questions no one wanted to answer. When he heard what had happened, how his wife's spirit had delivered another woman's child, he broke down for the first time since the sad incident. She always wanted to help, he said through tears. Even when the pain was too much, she still woke up early, wore her uniform, still went in. She said if she stayed back, people would suffer. And so he joined them. Together they formed a small group. They printed leaflets, held community meetings, recorded testimonies from other women who had been mistreated in labor, spoke on radio, and slowly the whispers that once lived in the hospital walls began to grow louder. For more interesting African folktales and stories like this, please do well to like, comment, and subscribe.